Mr. May is recognized on Amendment 12.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A amendment you can read for yourself, but I will read it for you for those who choose not to. Any state or local government agencies, nonprofit groups, or quasi-governmental groups that are appropriated state funds or authorized to expend federal funds shall not allocate any such funds to an entity for a workforce development project that engages in environmental, social, and governance ratings. So this would prevent expenditures to those groups that use ESG ratings. I would ask for a passage, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. May takes his second 10 minutes. Mr. May is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Some folks do not realize that the fight that we are currently in for our future generation, whether that's through woke political ideology being shoved down the throats of our students in our schools, or through our constituents, through their businesses. I don't think it's the state's responsibility, nor do I think the state should promote bringing in woke corporations who seek to undermine the values of our constituents. So if you think that the Volvos and the BMWs of the world, that we should provide them incentives, that we should provide them with taxpayer dollars or special support to pick winners and losers so they can bring their woke ESG, their woke ideology into South Carolina, then table this. But I would urge you not to.
Hear none, clerk close polls, tabulate. Vote of 76-28. Amendment 12 is tabled. Mr. May is recognized on 13.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Similar amendment, except we've replaced ESG with diversity, equity, and inclusion. So no fund shall be allocated to any entity for workforce development project that engages in diversity, equity, and inclusion practices. I'd ask for passage, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Mr. Caskey has a question. You take question, Mr. May. Mr. May has stepped away. Mr. West is recognized on the amendment.
And I understand Mr. May's intent here, and I know it's
All right, let's
passionate.
have order. Let's have order, please.
But I do want to say this. I mean, we live in a country that's a free society. Freedom and liberty are important to us. We've had these debates over numerous bills over the years. When I put my hard-earned money, sweat equity into my businesses, nobody's going to come in, state, federal or not, and tell me about the policies I'm going to institute in my own company. We have many of these companies who are coming to our state who have been around for decades. What they do within their organization, whether we agree with it or not, is not our business unless it violates the law. So, Mr. Speaker, I move to maintain the freedom of our companies in this state and table this motion.
Mr. Caskey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And ladies and gentlemen in the balcony, welcome to the South Carolina House where you can watch the sausage get made. And to our friends who are joining us on SCE TV, what you are seeing here today is, unfortunately, the devolution of politics in 2023. Because instead of having thoughtful, serious discussion about how we can limit some of these pernicious practices in South Carolina, what we are doing with Mr. May's amendment, which, as you'll note, he ran away from the questions for, like the real warrior that he wants you to believe that this state has a lack of. What I want to tell folks who are watching this is Mr. May's amendment, and the question I wanted to ask him, would force out of business companies that live and work and employ South Carolinians where I come from in Lexington County. So companies that have these DEI statements and preferences, I don't necessarily, as a personal matter, agree with those practices. So I want to be very clear about this by opposing this amendment. What I'm saying is not that I oppose a restriction, curtailment, or abolition of DEI statements. What I'm saying is I'd like to know who Mr. May wants to unemploy at UPS or at Amazon or Michelin, who are all companies that have these statements. Or perhaps, as somebody who likes to stay well-fed, who at Domino's or McDonald's? Who in those companies is it in Lexington County that Mr. May doesn't want to be employed anymore? Because that is what will happen if we start down this road. And I suspect over the next few hours here today and certainly next week, we will see time and time again a performative politics, which says rather than address these issues seriously, we're going to do it through haphazard, ill-considered amendment. Why do I say it that way? Because what you noticed in this amendment and in the last amendment is not a definition of what these words are. It was another vapid bumper sticker expression. Because I saw it on cable news. We don't like it. Oh, man. We got to get rid of it. Ladies and gentlemen, we are not here in this body to make suggestions. We make laws. And it's hard. And to the consternation of many, it requires getting in the weeds. And you may not like the difficulty that the difficulty that it takes to get to detail, but that's what good legislation is. So I implore you, reject this brand of toxic, cancerous politics, and let's focus on the business of South Carolina, because we are saying to the world, we are open for business. We are ready for a new era of South Carolina, and we're going to leave this nonsense where it belongs, in the trash bin.
Ms. Cromer's recognized.
I just wanted to speak on behalf as a small business owner, the difference between a private business and a business that's funded by the welfare of the state. That makes the difference in the bills and the policies that we can pass and we can ask people, because it's our taxpayers that are funding the DEI, ESG nonsense that they don't want. I'm here on behalf of the constituents and the people, not big business, and that's why I'm opposed to funding DEI and ESG.
Mr. Magnus is recognized.
I rise to speak in support of this amendment. And ladies and gentlemen, there are some people in this body that want to portray this sort of tough guy persona, that they're beating back the radicals. What is radical about this proposal? This is a simple amendment that just says that we're not going to be subsidizing DEI. Now, the representative there before me mentioned that he thinks that DEI is undefined. That is really not correct, because we know what DEI is. I'm going to read for you some things from a national organization that talks about what it is. They say they honor diversity and promote social justice. They view diversity from an intersectional perspective, which is what? That means you're higher or lower on a totem pole. If you're gay and you're black and you're trans, then you're higher on the totem pole. But if you're a man and you're straight, or if you're a woman and you're straight, then you're lower on the totem pole. That's what intersectionality is. They acknowledge the ways in which identities operate within systems of power, privilege, and oppression. And I could go on, talk about how they, again, promoting social justice, creating gender-neutral restrooms and spaces for Black, Indigenous, people of color, and LGBTQI2S plus members. Whatever all that means, okay? But that's how I'm quoting right here. This is DEI, ladies and gentlemen. This is what they're pushing on your districts by way of these business practices. And we're saying we don't want to use taxpayer money to push these things. That's all we're saying with this amendment. And this shouldn't be that hard. I understand maybe if there's some disagreement about should we deal with ESGs because, we're going to have that in another bill. And, there's more, maybe it's more complicated, but this is not complicated. This amendment is very straightforward. It's very straightforward. We know what DEI is. We know that this is an agenda that's been pushed for years. And we're simply saying let's not use taxpayer money to basically discriminate against different people. Because that's what we're actually saying when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're saying let's treat some people differently than others. And if you look at the book Stamped by Ibram X. Kendi, he says that current and future discrimination is the solution to past discrimination. So the whole idea of DEI and what's called anti-racism, the whole idea is that we're going to create discrimination now and in the future to try to correct past things instead of being neutral, instead of treating people the same. And that's a fundamentally different view of the world. That's a fundamentally different vision for South Carolina than what I believe you and I, every person in this room, should have to treat people not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, not by their relationship status, not by who they want to sleep with, but who they are. And we shouldn't deal with identities, we should deal with individuals, and we shouldn't make decisions based on intersectionality and diversity, equity, and inclusion. Thank you.
Magnuson, you've got a number of folks with questions. Do you want to take them, sir?
I better not. I better not take it.
Okay. Mr. Hart's recognized.
In all sincere, I want to thank Mr. West and the committee for this bill. It's a great bill. I want you to take a look at the board, and I hope that we don't fall for it. Don't fall for the banana in the tailpipe. Don't take the bait on the red meat, because that's what it is. It's just red meat. Don't take the bait. Don't do it. And I'm gonna ask that we pass this bill, we table this amendment, and we move forward to help the citizens of the state of South Carolina.
Mr. Adam Morgan.
Cancerous politics. I'm speaking for the amendment. It was mentioned that this is cancerous politics. You know, open debate and dialogue and public disagreement is not cancerous politics. It is foundational to the republic. And you're going to have to get over it in this chamber. This isn't a closed caucus door meeting where you can control what people say and what happens in here. You don't get to do that in here. People are going to stand up and disagree and speak out. This is not a crazy amendment. We talked about big government stepping in. We don't want big government to step in. This is government funds that are going to certain projects. We're already stepping in. And by the way, we already have certain standards that qualify or disqualify businesses from taking part in this. This is just an additional one. Now, you can completely disagree with this, and I know some of you do. That's great. You can fully support this. That's great. But don't come up here and try to shame and silence people for speaking out and promoting their ideals, their constituents' ideals. Just simply vote on it. Because this is how it works in here. Somebody wants to put up an amendment that you just going to make you go red and you're going to hate it. Well, guess what? You'll get to vote on the board. But let's be careful about what we position out to the public, that we don't want, that everything we're doing here is phony politics and silly and we shouldn't be amending. We absolutely should be amending legislation that reflects what our constituents sent us here for. You can vote against it. You can vote for it. Do what you're going to do. That's your freedom. And God bless us that we get to live in America and take part in this system. Thank you very much.
And Mr. Ott's recognized.
Everybody want to stand up and take a deep breath? Take a deep breath. Maybe bring the temperature down a little bit. That's okay. I appreciate the lesson that Mr. Morgan just brought to the entire body on how things work in here, as if none of us were aware. But nevertheless, ladies and gentlemen, I actually want to speak to the amendment itself. I wanted to ask questions, but unfortunately, this so-called debate that we are supposed to engage in, Mr. Morgan, is hard to do when everybody walks away from the podium after making their campaign speeches. But nevertheless, ladies and gentlemen, if you will read the bill, not one place in the bill does it say or allow for the allocation of any funding to any business. It's not there. And that's what I wanted to ask Mr. Magnuson. Where do we send money to these businesses that you are trying to restrict from doing what they choose to do? I thought that the so-called Republican mantra was pro-business, was to allow businesses to run themselves the way they see fit for their business. That's what I want to do as a business owner. I don't want the government coming in and telling me what I can and can't do. But ladies and gentlemen, read the bill for yourself. This is not an appropriate amendment because it solves nothing that is in the legislation. Nowhere in the bill does it appropriate the first dollar to a business. This legislation is attempting to support our small, our medium-sized, and our large businesses across this state. Get the employees. You want to talk about talking to your business?
I'm sorry, Mr. Stavernakis, for what purpose do you rise?
Point of order.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Speaker, the substantial effect of the bill is to reorganize the workforce departments in the state of South Carolina. The substantial effect of the amendment is to restrict the appropriation of funds, and I think it's not germane to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the opportunity to be heard. If you look at, I think it's page 3 under section 41-30-140A, the text of the bill says all state and local government agencies, nonprofit groups, and quasi-governmental groups that are appropriated state funds or authorized to expend federal funds shall. And then it has a list of different requirements, such as reports that have to be done. So I would personally argue.
I'm sorry, Mr. Magnuson. I'm having a little bit of difficulty hearing. So could you call me to the section? I want to follow along with you.
Yes, sir. It's section 41-30-140, and it does deal with expenditure of state funds and federal funds and how they will be expended. And so this simply adds a section after this section for the same intent.
Mr. Magnuson, I'm not finding 140 right now with the copy they gave me. Let me take a look. I'm sorry, Ms. Stavernakis, you wish to be heard further?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I hear what he's saying. I don't believe that's the test, that there's one similar section. The test is the substantial effect of the bill, which is to reorganize governmental agencies. The amendment substantial effect is to limit the expenditure of funds, the allocation of funds to outside agencies, public, nonprofits, private businesses, et cetera.
Go to 6324. Amendment 13 is tabled. Clerk will read.
Number 14. Number 14 is Mr. May.
This amendment limits the scope of the previous amendments. It states that any state or local government agency that is involved in workforce development pursuant to this chapter must not provide any diversity, equity, or inclusion training.
Mr. West is recognized on 14.
With all due respect to Mr. May, we alleviated the national agency or organization that was being referred to. This bill has nothing to do with DEI whatsoever. It's not included in the bill. This is a bill to put people back to work and to provide information to students and teachers. It's basically, and this is my opinion, nonsensical when we've already alleviated this portion from the bill itself, and I would move to table, sir.
And on the board is ordered. Question tabling Amendment 14. Rules tabulate. Go to 7124. House tables Amendment 14. Mr. May is recognized on Amendment 1515.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate Mr. West's efforts from removing the organization that had a DEI 2024 plan. This particular amendment would prevent any of the entities, committees, commissions, et cetera, in this section from hiring an employee or expend funds to provide diversity, equity, and inclusion training. So therefore, if one of these committees in the future wanted to hire a DEI officer, they would be prevented in doing so. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I request passage.
Mr. West is recognized.
Again, all due respect to Mr. May, the organization has been deleted. This is a red herring. We're trying to simply pass a bill to have our students, parents, teachers, employers in this state on the same page with the right information to move forward. This is not a DEI bill, nor will it ever be. And if you're comfortable with going home to your constituents, your manufacturers, your parents, your students, and telling them that you're against workforce, I understand that. That is by all means your prerogative as a representative, but I move to table the amendment, Mr. Speaker.
Voting on the board's ordered. Vote of 79-22, House tables Amendment 15.